There's something special about a December pay-per-view card. It's the last one of the year. It's the only thing we have before we go on to this long break. Now, actually, we do have a Fight Night card the week after, but the pay-per-view card itself, it's the last big thing we have in 2024. Alexandre Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. Is it the best main event? Probably not. But it is a decent matchup. It's a title fight. Pantoja has ran through the flyweight division. They had to bring in some random dude from Japan. And I think Japan is looking for a massive upset here. The UFC would probably love for Japan to get a win over Alexandre Pantoja. Because why? They want that market. And Pantoja has been the champion for a few fights now. And they're like, all right, we need something new here in the flyweight division. Decent main event. Co-main event is great. Shavkat versus Ian Garry. That's a great matchup in my opinion. Two undefeated guys. And overall, the card is pretty solid. From top to bottom, we got a lot of weird matchups in certain fights. We'll talk about those. But no women's MMA. Going to be a lot of testosterone in the building. Looking forward to that. I'm going to go through. I'll give you every single one of my early picks for every single fight. I'll give you the official picks later in the week on the channel. I'll give you the best bet show later in the week as well. I will be there in attendance in Las Vegas next Saturday. So if you're there, let me know. Or let me know in the comments if you're going to be there as well. Hopefully we can link up, meet, and have a good time, man. Hopefully it should be a good way to end the pay-per-view schedule for 2024. Let's scroll all the way to the bottom. We'll start with the first fight of the night. And, boys, what other way to start the night than some low-level heavyweights? Okay, Brzeski. I don't know how the guy's still in the UFC. To be honest, I would assume this is probably the last fight on his contract. He was scheduled to fight Talison Teixeira from the Contender Series. In my opinion, they were looking for Talison Teixeira to pick up a nice little win and get rid of Brzeski. I think since Talison Teixeira pulled out, Kennedy Nzechukwu was kind of getting a nice little matchup here. Now, he had a great matchup his last time out against Chris Barnett, which wasn't too long ago, UFC 308. Pretty much got a free win there. He steps up, looking to get another free win here. I don't think Brzeski has much in his bag. I've been down that train many a times. Worked out for me once against Walter Walker, but overall, Brzeski just doesn't have the most power on the feet. He's not the most durable guy. Kennedy Nzechukwu, even for all of his flaws, he should probably be able to beat Brzeski, okay? Kennedy Nzechukwu did make OSP look like he was back in his prime a couple fights ago, which is worrying. But at heavyweight, he's a little bit faster than these guys. He does have some pretty decent striking. It's just all about putting it all together. And I think he should be able to put it all together against Brzeski, who just doesn't really offer too much, in my opinion. So Kennedy Nzechukwu is the early pick. Probably don't see that one changing. But low-level heavyweights, what a way to start the night, you know? Gotta love it. Moving on. Lightweight bout here. We got Chase Hooper taking on Clay Guida. Not sure why this matchup is being made, but either way, looks like Chase Hooper's going to pick up another W. Now, Chase Hooper was looked at as a guy that was almost looking like a failed prospect. Came into the UFC very young, but it looks like he's came into his frame a little bit. He moved up a weight class, having some success. And Clay Guida, I mean, he's just so old. He doesn't really offer too much right now outside of just being tough and being gritty. But I don't see a way where he could really grind out this fight to a decision victory. I don't know that he finishes Chase Hooper. I just don't really see it. I think Chase is pretty durable overall. I mean, the guy got knocked out by Steve Garcia, but he took some massive shots. Massive shots. And Clay Guida just doesn't have that in his bag. Clay Guida going to need some wrestling success to win a fight here. And if he does try to take down Chase Hooper, good luck. Good luck, because these guys have already grappled. Chase Hooper put him in a calf slicer in a bad spot. And if that happens in this fight, if they find themselves on the ground in this fight, Chase Hooper is going to be looking very, very good. Okay, he's just a much better grappler. He's tall and long. He shouldn't be able to stay at range, and when he wants to, he can level change, probably get some takedowns. He could even pull guard, to be honest. He could pull guard, find his way into some better spots. Chase Hooper is going to be the pick here. He is a big favorite, not saying anything too crazy there, but Chase Hooper, now a dad, got that dad strength, might be coming into his own. Chase Hooper is going to be the pick. Let's move on. Michael Chiesa, Max Griffin. Interesting matchup to me. I think this is going to be it's a solid matchup to make because I think Max Griffin has pretty solid takedown defense. He is the older guy in this fight, which is kind of weird to think about, but he is the older guy. He's a guy that has had a pretty good UFC career. I mean, he's really only losing to guys who he should lose to, like a Michael Morales or a Neil Magny. I mean, he went to a split decision with Neil Magny, dropped him in the first. I was there for that fight. I was holding my Neil Magny ticket. I was worried. But either way, I mean, Max Griffin gave him a good run for his money, and he's beaten the guys that he should beat. He's coming off a win against Jeremiah Wells as an underdog. That's a nice little win. Jeremiah Wells didn't really do much. Max Griffin was just landing the better shots and looking a little bit better. Chiesa coming off the win against Tony Ferguson, he might be back. He might be back, you know? If Tony's not back, then Michael Chiesa might be back. But the thing is with Chiesa, just doesn't really offer too much on the feet. He's going to need some wrestling success, some grappling success in this fight to get a win. Griffin, not the easiest guy to take down. I mean, he's got pretty solid cage takedown defense. Chiesa's probably going to have to look for some type of takedowns out in the open. Obviously, he could work his way through a takedown on the cage, but I think it'll be a little bit tougher. On the feet, Max Griffin is probably going to be the better striker here. His footwork is pretty decent. Got a decent jab. Definitely more power. Durability has always been there for Max Griffin. This dude is so hard to knock out. Just got a brick of a head. And I don't really think Chiesa is going to be in there slugging it out. So I actually kind of lean towards Max Griffin in this one, just because I think he'll win the minutes on the feet, probably land a little bit more damage. Could see the fight go into a decision where it's a damage versus control type of fight. And Max Griffin getting his hand raised. We also got to think, Chiesa's been working the booth for the UFC a lot. Maybe this is his retirement fight on a pay-per-view card. Got the win against Tony, and he hadn't fought in quite some time. So maybe this is his retirement fight. He wants to get one last one in 2024 and work his way to the desk for the UFC, get a nice little full-time job there. We'll see. But I think Max Griffin is going to be my early pick. I think he should probably win this one. Moving on. Cody Durden taking on Joshua Van. Great matchup here. I think Cody Durden, as the underdog, might just be the side. I think Joshua Van is a great young prospect, but there are some issues with the way that he fights. He's a small guy who heavily relies on volume and being in your face. And we saw the flaw pop up against Charles Johnson. When he was walking him down the entire fight, Charles Johnson is a guy that has an ability to fight off the back foot and still be effective. And he was landing some big shots on Joshua Van, and Joshua Van just, at one point, couldn't take the big shots. Got hit with a nice little uppercut, got knocked out. And I thought he would take some time off. Not the case. Okay, the guy jumped back in there against Edgar Shirez to fill in for somebody else. And he got a win, but it was another one of those fights where he was taking some big shots. Now he's not really taking too much time off again. I think that was, September? So that was, 2 months ago? 2.5, 3 months ago? Going up into the rankings now against Cody Durden. And I think Cody Durden, even though he is a guy that has been knocked out, he has been submitted in all of his UFC losses, it's a tough matchup, in my opinion. I think Cody Durden can get takedowns on Joshua Van. I think Durden's a pressure guy himself. So these are going to be two guys looking to establish their dominance as far as where the fight is taking place. I think if Cody Durden can establish a decent jab, establish some low kicks early, get some takedowns early, it's going to be tough for Joshua Van to kind of get into a rhythm throughout the fight, and he's a rhythm fighter. He needs to be in his bag as far as walking you down, landing combinations, ripping the body, going upstairs, and just overwhelming you. If he can't do that, if Cody Durden's going to be getting takedowns and laying on top of him, doing some damage there, or even just holding on to his back, it's going to be tough for Joshua Van to work his way into this fight and look like a favorite. So I am tending to lean towards Cody Durden to win this one and protect his ranking there in the flyweight division. So I'm going to take Cody Durden for the early pick. It's going to be one I want to watch a little bit more film on, though, throughout the week and kind of solidify my stance on this one. Moving on. We got Chris Weidman taking on Eric Anders. Rescheduling. I hate when they reschedule a fight like this, especially when it's like a month later, not even a month later, because are you really going to get the best of it? I had a bet on Chris Weidman as an underdog against Eric Anders. I thought Eric Anders has really needed some wrestling success to win his fights recently. I just didn't know that he was going to be able to do that against Chris Weidman. I think Weidman's striking was going to be a little bit better than Eric Anders. These are two old guys, Probably going to be looking slow. Probably going to be some cage control time. I thought Chris Weidman fighting at MSG was going to be able to pull off a decision victory, most likely, in that fight against Eric Anders. But now that, Eric Anders pulled out, they're moving it up to a catch weight a few weeks later. I just hate these rebookings. I'm still going to take Chris Weidman for the early pick. It's probably going to be my pick. I do think Chris Weidman's he's been to a much higher level. I know he's had all the injuries, and he's old. And he's coming off a win against Bruno Silva where he eye-poked the shit out of Bruno Silva. But either way, Eric Anders is old himself. He had a long career as a football player. That's not good for your durability. That's not good for your physical health. And I thought Chris Weidman would be able to go in there and win a fight against an aging Eric Anders. And I think he probably still can, even at a catch weight a few weeks later. So I'm going to take him for the early pick, but we'll see where these betting odds are when I look at them later today. But Chris Weidman is the early pick. Moving on. Welterweight bout here, Randy Brown versus Bryan Battle. Great matchup. Bryan Battle has really come into his own as far as getting some fans in the UFC. Great performances last time out against Kevin Jousset. Just overwhelmed him with the pressure. Was able to eat all the shots that Jousset was throwing at him and just get him to back up. And Jousset just didn't have an answer for it. So great performance for him. Gained a ton of fans. Obviously, the post-fight speech, the walkout song. It was great. I love me some Bryan Battle. He's a good dude. And I love to see him win. But he's a favorite here against Randy Brown. Randy Brown's been around the top 20, 25 for a good amount of time. Now, he's beaten these guys that he probably should beat. And he's losing to the guys that break into the rankings and do some good things in the UFC. So, it's a good test for Bryan Battle. I think stylistically, Randy Brown's probably going to be able to win most of the striking exchanges because Randy Brown has the ability to stay long. He uses his length very well. He can fight off the back foot. Great jab. And I don't think Bryan Battle is the greatest when it comes down to a straight striking match. But if he can mix in some cage control, if he can mix in some takedowns, if he can mix in some grappling, that's where he can have the most success to me in this fight. Because we saw Randy Brown get taken down by Zaleski a couple times, get his back, nearly submit him in round 2, I think it was. And Bryan Battle is a pretty great fighter on the ground. He's not a guy that really looks for takedowns himself. He's been getting most of his submission wins when guys are looking to take him down, but he can mix it in. And if he can get the forward pressure going, if he can wear down on Randy Brown, then he could absolutely win this fight. He's just got to come in here with a right game plan. Because Bryan Battle, historically, is a guy that uses his length, tries to stay to the outside a little bit. If he gets into that fight with Randy Brown, I think Randy Brown's probably going to win. But if he's smart, comes into the game plan like he had his last time against Jousset, keep the forward pressure going, overwhelm him with volume, mix in some cage control, and just be relentless with his pace, I think he can win this fight. So I am tended to lead toward Bryan Battle as a pick, but considering the odds, I don't know. It's a big step up for him. Randy Brown's been there, done that. Definitely has the abilities to win this fight. So Bryan Battle's the pick, but low confidence on that one. Moving on. Movsar Evloev, Aljamain Sterling. Crazy that this is on the prelims. Very high-level matchup in the featherweight division. I guess maybe they put it on the prelims because Evloev is a decision machine. Dude's never had a finish in the UFC, but he is still undefeated. And it's a great matchup, in my opinion, because Aljo, being the former champion, moving up to 145, dismantling Calvin Kattar, looks like he belongs here at featherweight. Now, the thing is, he's got a very tough test. Very, very tough test. Because at 135, Aljo was a weight bully. The guy was, I wouldn't say he's not the tallest guy, but he's very filled out, very strong. And once he gets you to the ground, it's very tough to get up. Because a lot of these guys are either skinny, like a Sean O'Malley, or they're smaller than him and just don't have the level of grappling as an Aljo. Now, the fight against Calvin Kattar, it's like Calvin Kattar can't grapple. He can't grapple. So that's an asterisk towards that win, in my opinion, because he's going up against a guy that can't grapple. And he ragdolled him for 3 rounds. Evloev can grapple. He can grapple pretty damn well. and he can also strike pretty damn well. So I don't know where Aljo's going to have much of an advantage in this fight. The plus money on Aljo definitely looks great, just considering what he's done in his UFC career. But he is older, and Evloev literally never lost. He's a Russian. I think he's probably got Aljo covered in most spots. Like, how does Aljo win this fight? It's probably getting a back take, submitting him, or getting a back take in 2 out of the 3 rounds and winning minutes off of that. Outside of that, I think Evloev will probably be able to outstrike him. I think he'll probably be able to get takedowns on Aljo, and Aljo's not really a guy that has a great guard, from his back. So I think Evloev wins this fight, and he's going to be the early pick, and we can move on. Welterweight bout, Vicente Luque and Themba Gorimbo. So the odds on your screen are based off of Luque versus Nick Diaz. I don't know what Nick Diaz is up to nowadays, but looks like he had to pull out of that. And in steps Themba Gorimbo. Themba Gorimbo is actually the favorite in this fight, which is kind of nuts to me. But at the same time, it makes a little bit of a sense because Luque literally, I think he said it himself, quit out there against Joaquin Buckley. Pretty much just pulled guard and allowed Buckley to rain down shots from guard, and the ref stopped it. Not a good look. Not a good look at all. Skill for skill, Vicente Luque is the much better fighter. But it comes down to, where is your head at? Where's your mentality at? And considering Luque was supposed to be fighting Nick Diaz, that tells me that, Luque, the UFC was probably trying to match up Luque with somebody that they thought probably wouldn't present much of a threat, and maybe Luque could get back on track. And even if Nick Diaz were to go in there and win the fight, it's like, okay, he beat a ranked guy. Nick Diaz is back in the talks. Now this is just a weird matchup because Themba, I think he's a physical specimen. Like, he's tall, he's long, he's strong, he has solid wrestling, solid cardio. But I don't know that his skills are all that great. Like, he has decent striking, decent power, but it's not very technical. It's not high volume. And on the ground, the guy who did get submitted by A.J. Fletcher. If he's going on the ground with Vicente Luque, I got to believe Luque's got the better grappling than A.J. Fletcher. It could probably submit Themba Gorimbo on the ground. That's MMA math. We can't always look at that, and that was earlier in Themba's UFC career. I think it was his debut. So Themba's definitely gotten better. How does Themba win this fight? I think Themba's probably got to impose his will, make Vicente Luque not want to be there again, and he could probably win this fight. But if Luque comes into full form, then Luque should win this fight. Okay, Luque's better skill for skill. It's just the miles that he's had, the injuries he's had, especially the brain injury, not looking good. Considering he gave up his last fight, that doesn't look good either. So I'm actually just going to take Themba Gorimbo for the early pick. Considering he's the favorite, probably wouldn't get too invested there, but either way, I think it's a winnable matchup for him. He's just got to hold himself down when it goes to the ground. Don't get submitted and you'll be all right. Dominic Reyes and Anthony Smith. What are we doing here? Come on. There we go. Dominic Reyes versus Anthony Smith. Very, very weird matchup. Like, these are some of the weirdest matchups I've seen in a while, and it almost gets weirder once we hit the main card. Dominic Reyes, the glass chin of glass chins, finally gets a win against Dustin Jacoby. Is he back? Is he back off a knockout win to Dustin Jacoby, who is old himself? He's been knocked out himself, been dropped in a lot of fights. I don't know. Now, Dominic Reyes is the favorite here. UFC website is so bad they just can't update their odds. What are they doing? I don't know. Anthony Smith, on the other hand, he's the underdog here, and Anthony Smith has looked pretty bad his last fight. He looked really bad his last fight. Like, I honestly couldn't believe what I was watching his last fight. Very gun-shy, just not much of a willingness to let his hands go. He's getting taken down by Dolidze and covering up, like not really doing much. So I just don't know what Anthony Smith has to offer at this point in his career. I got to think like the retirement fight is coming eventually. Maybe this is the one. Maybe it is. On a pay-per-view card, he just wants to end the year 2024, end his career there, and move on to working the desk or podcasting or whatever into 2025. Dominic Reyes is a big favorite, is always sketchy because his chin could go at any point. But you got to ask yourself, does Anthony Smith have the power in his hands to put out Dominic Reyes? Well, it might not take much. Dominic Reyes is going to be the pick for me, but this is a fight that I just cannot look at it and be like, yeah, I want to be super invested in this one because I have a really strong read. Nah. Dominic Reyes is the early pick. Let's move on to the main card. We got Nate Landwehr taking on Doo Ho Choi. I like the matchup, but again, it's just a weird one, man. It's just a weird one. Nate Landwehr is a fan favorite. The guy, he always brings fun fights, but the guy is not the youngest. He's had a lot of miles on him as far as getting hit. He's been knocked out a few times. He's been dropped in a lot of fights. And Doo Ho Choi, he's just a wild card. He's a wild card. He took that long layoff. I mean, he was a guy that he was a fan favorite. Took a long layoff, came back. He went to a draw with Kyle Nelson. Probably should have won that fight. He got a point deducted with the headbutt. And the headbutt, I don't really think it was worth a point deduction. So he probably should have won that fight. And then he comes back against Bill Algeo, wins his first fight in a very long time. The thing with this one is like Nate Landwehr is so hittable, especially early, that I think Doo Ho Choi could maybe knock him out. But if he doesn't, does Nate Landwehr have the forward pressure and just the willingness to go in there and break down a Doo Ho Choi? And does Doo Ho Choi break to the pressure of Nate Landwehr? It's a good question. I would honestly look, if you like the Nate Landwehr side, I'd maybe look to take him live after round one. I know this ain't a betting show, but for the pick, I am going to take Nate Landwehr because I don't know that Doo Ho Choi knocks him out, but consider we are in the OG gloves, maybe he can't. I think Doo Ho Choi is definitely live for a KO early. I'm a guy that has faded Nate Landwehr a good amount of times just because I think he's very susceptible to getting hit. It doesn't always react the best to getting hit. Jamal Emmers almost knocked him out before Nate Landwehr knocked him out. So there's a lot of questions there. And Nate is aging. It's very questionable, but Doo Ho Choi, I don't think he's the greatest fighter. He just has really solid boxing, pretty solid power, and maybe that is enough to get a win against Nate Landwehr, but I'm still going to take Nate Landwehr for the pick right now. But like I said, probably better to take him after live bet him after round one. Moving on. Another featherweight matchup here, and it just gets weirder. It just gets weirder, man. Bryce Mitchell taking on Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie, been a long-time supporter of the Hey Jai Picks channel, bro. He followed me back when I was at like 20,000 followers on Instagram. He's always looking at my stories. I've never DM'd the guy. He's never DM'd me. But I just think it's great that like Kron Gracie's been following me since I was like at 20,000 followers on Instagram. And I like the guy, man. The guy is he's a wild card. He's a wild card. Obviously, fighting-wise, stylistically, he's got great grappling. On the feet, he doesn't really offer much. His last fight against Charles Jourdain did not look good. Like, Charles Jourdain had the great game plan of don't go to the ground with him, just box him up on the feet. Even if he tries to pull guard, don't go down to the ground with him, and you can win. Bryce Mitchell, definitely has the striking to beat Kron Gracie on the feet, but he's a guy that'll probably test Kron Gracie's grappling because Bryce Mitchell, at his base, is a grappler, and he probably feels very confident in his grappling. So if he goes down to the ground with Kron Gracie, then it gets a little dicey, man. You know, like you're kind of just giving Kron a chance to win the fight at that point. But either way, I don't know why Kron Gracie is getting a ranked matchup right now. So, you know, Bryce Mitchell is going to be the pick. He's a big favorite here. He should win the fight. He should be able to outstrike him on the feet. Should be able to handle himself on the ground. But like I said, if he does go for those takedowns against Kron Gracie, you're just giving him a chance to win the fight. Because he could easily just go out there and outbox Kron Gracie. You know, even Bryce Mitchell's not the greatest striker, but I think he's good enough to beat Kron Gracie on the feet. So Bryce Mitchell is the pick. Another weird matchup there. Very, very weird matchup. Moving on. Heavyweight bout. A rematch here, Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. And as much as I want to take Volkov at the odds, man. I think it's just going to be very tough. I think it's going to be very tough because Volkov is on a nice little win streak. He beat Sergey Pavlovich to a pulp his last time out, and he cashed me a nice little plus 200 ticket there. It looked great. But this is a very tough fight. Like, if you go back and watch their first fight, Volkov landed a good amount of strikes on Cyril Gane, but he lost 50 to 45. Like, at the end of the day, Cyril Gane is just more athletic, better movement, and he was able to land more head strikes than Volkov. Volkov is landing a lot of leg kicks, a lot of body shots. It's just very tough to touch Cyril Gane on the head. You know, and Volkov's not a guy that has big knockout power. He's a big dude, but I think that kind of hurts him a little bit because his speed is just not up to par with Cyril Gane. His movement isn't, and he just can't really explode into like a combination on Cyril Gane because Cyril Gane's footwork is just too good. The only way that Volkov, I think, could really win this fight is if he mixed in some grappling. He's just not really a guy that does that. But maybe he looks at that first fight and changes up the game plan a little bit and looks for a takedown and looks for some top pressure. I think his grappling has gotten a lot better over the years. And obviously, you know, he put on some weight, put on some muscle throughout the last 3 to 4 years to where he could get a takedown and he could be heavy on top and he could win minutes that way. But overall, I think I just got to go Cyril Gane in this one. Love me some Volkov, but I think it's a very tough fight to win stylistically when you're going to be slower. You're not going to have a big knockout power on the feet. Cyril Gane's probably just going to dance his way around the cage and pick you apart for 15 minutes and win a decision. So Cyril Gane is the pick, and we can move on to the co-main event. Welterweight bout here. Shavkat Rakhmonov taking on Ian Garry. There's a lot of people out there that think this is just Shavkat Rakhmonov one-way traffic. And it would be tough to argue a case against that because it's been pretty much one-way traffic his entire career. 18 wins. I think it's 18. All wins. Undefeated. All wins by finish. But I think this is going to be a very tough fight for him, if I'm being honest, because Ian Garry usually has great game plans. He really does. He's willing to fight a boring game plan to get a win. He's willing to not engage in these big striking, how would you say it, exchanges. He's not going to just stand in the pocket and swing away with you. He'll stay to the outside. He's a very solid striker from the outside. Great footwork, good timing. He's never lost himself. The thing is, Shavkat probably going to need some grappling success to win this fight because Ian's going to be very good from the outside, and I think he's probably going to be better from the outside than Shavkat. Shavkat going to need to get some takedowns here. Shavkat's takedown accuracy, not the best. I don't think his wrestling is the best. When the fight hits the ground, that's when he's going to be more dangerous. He could definitely go out there and submit Ian Garry, so I think he probably will be the better grappler when the fight hits the ground, but it's got to hit the ground. On the feet, I think Ian Garry is going to be able to match it. So at the current odds, personally, I'm not going to be playing Shavkat at minus 360. I don't think it's worth it. If anything, there's value on Ian Garry. But something does tell me, you know, if Shavkat does get the fight to the ground, he's going to be looking pretty good. And I think he'll probably be able to either put him in bad spots or do some damage on the ground. Ian Garry's, his margin of victory lately hasn't looked the greatest. You know, he's going to a split decision with Jeff Neal. He's going to a close decision with Michael Venom Page. But I think those are very tough matchups for Ian Garry. And maybe Shavkat is an even tougher matchup. But I do think he's going to have some success on the feet striking. So Shavkat's going to be the pick for me. But betting-wise, I'd probably say it's a dog or pass. Because Ian Garry going to come in with a good game plan. Not going to take a lot of risks. And he could just dance his... I don't even think it's going to be a great fight, to be honest. I think it's a solid matchup, but it could turn out to be a snoozer. I was the guy that said Ian Garry versus MVP was going to be a boring fight. It's going to be a really boring fight. What did it turn out to be? A very boring fight. Ian Garry just has a willingness to just go in there and fight a boring fight. As long as he gets the win, he's happy. He could come in here with a game plan to do that against Shavkat and pull off a victory. But either way, Shavkat's going to be the early pick for me. One I want to watch a little bit more film on. Shavkat's not been the most active guy either. You know, his last fight was against Wonder Boy almost a year ago. So a little bit of ring rust, you never know. But either way, he'll be the pick. Moving on. Main event, Alexandre Pantoja, Kai Asakura. So they bring in Asakura from Ryzen. He's a big name over in Japan, and obviously the UFC wants to get their Japanese fan base a champion. Never been one. Kai Asakura might be the guy. Pantoja, he's a motherfucker, bro. He is a guy that's never been knocked out, never been submitted, so he's never been finished. You know he's durable as hell. He's fought multiple 5-round fights. He's won multiple 5-round fights. His takedowns are there. His cardio, he might look tired at certain times, but his cardio does hold up. His striking is pretty solid. He's got power in his hands. I think it's a very tough fight for Kai Asakura, man. I know Pantoja has taken a lot of damage throughout his career, and maybe this is the time where Kai Asakura, being the explosive striker that he is, finds the chin and finally cracks it. But stylistically, I think Pantoja is going to get takedowns. He's going to get top control. Probably going to be able to get to the back here and there. I think he probably wins again, man. Like, I watching the tape on Asakura, he's a dangerous striker who has pretty solid timing. He loves to throw that jumping knee when guys are shooting a takedown, so that's definitely something Pantoja is going to have to be worried about. But I don't know that the level of competition he's facing is anywhere near the level that Pantoja is, or the level of competition that Pantoja has faced. So I think Pantoja gets takedowns here, probably wins a decision, or he could find a submission on Asakura. And Asakura is a guy that's been knocked out himself, and Pantoja cracks too. So Pantoja is going to be the pick for me. I just think this is a winnable matchup for him, and I don't think Asakura comes in here and wins a title in his first UFC fight. I think that's very, very tough to ask. So Pantoja's the pick. That'll do it for the early picks video. Please like the video for me. Subscribe to the channel. We'll be back here throughout the week with the official picks, with the best bet show later. Good luck to you. Hopefully I'll see you out in Vegas. We'll have a good time. Home fight team will be there. I'm pumped for it. Until next time, Hey Job Picks. We out.